Controlling, the net is empty, he throws it down, and in! He scored a goal! Martin Brodeur!
The hockey gods are Red Wing fans too, it appears. The Lightning have done it! They have done it! They have gone back to back!
Unbelievable.
Okay, and welcome back to another episode of Shut Your Five Hole and Listen, the podcast where we teach you about hockey and talk you about all of the news.
Yes. We have a lot of news today.
A lot of news, yes. But first, who are you?
Well, I'm Muffy. I am the Red Wings fan here at Shut Your Five Hole. What about you, Stephanie?
I'm Stephanie. I'm the Devils fan. And we both enjoy the Tampa Bay Lightning.
We do.
Because we live in Florida.
Yes, and we had to pick a Florida team, and Tampa's close to us. And we started going to the games, like, right when they were on their upward trajectory, so that was awesome.
That was awesome. It's not so awesome right now. Although they're not as bad as I thought they were going to be, but
No, they're having a decent season.
It's not, we're not. I will be very surprised if we make it to the Stanley Cup, but I digress. So we have a lot of news to talk about today.
We do have a lot of news. This is what happens when we delay our recording a week. We just get bombarded with news.
So let's kick things off by talking about a thing that ESPN tried to create some excitement around the broadcast and to get people watching live and in real time, which was the Frozen Frenzy.
The Frozen Frenzy. Can we talk about how dumb the name is?
The name is really dumb, but you also have to remember that ESPN is owned by Disney, so
it is very Disney-esque.
There was lots of alliteration, and I was expecting Elsa to just pop up at any moment. But all 32 teams played in one night. So 16 games starting at like 6 o'clock Eastern time.
And staggered start times about every 15 minutes throughout the evening.
What did you think?
I thought it was cool. I liked kind of the cutting in and out between the different games. I thought that was fun. But there were times that like they would cut into the game that I was expecting something big to happen. And then it was like, oh, nope. Never mind, and we moved on to the next game. So I think for an out of the gate run, it went as well as it could. But I think they have some kinks to work out if they're going to do something like that again.
Yeah, I hope they do it again. I actually thought it was really fun. Mm-hmm. I don't have cable, so I did not watch the broadcast that had Mark Messier and PK Subban, like the main feed that was on TV. So I watched what was streaming on ESPN Plus with Kevin Weeks, and I cannot remember the other guy's name. And that was just all popping in, popping out of every single, and I liked it. I thought it was fun.
Well, the Mark Messier broadcast was only at the very beginning. Then it switched to the Kevin Weeks one on cable as well.
So I didn't miss too much.
You didn't miss too much. It was only, I think, like the first hour of that Washington Capitals game that kicked things off at 6. That was the Mark Messier broadcast.
Well, I thought it was a cool concept. I thought it was fun. I agree. I think there were times where they popped into certain games and they thought something was going to happen and then it didn't. But I guess that's live sports. But it was fun watching them tally up how many goals were happening. You really did. Hockey is a fast-paced game. And you notice that when you're at the game. It feels very fast. But sometimes on TV, it doesn't feel as fast as it is. And I felt like this gave a casual viewer, someone who might not be a super fan, like the feeling more of like what happens when you're at a game.
Yeah, because you were definitely getting those highlight reel moments versus, when they're doing a line change and the player's standing behind the net with a puck waiting for everybody to complete the change. So you weren't getting like those pauses in the game. And I agree with you. It definitely makes it seem like it was going faster.
I also really like that I thought they did a really good job of educating about how the game works that they don't typically do in your average broadcast, like explaining the rules, explaining what icing was, like kind of what we do here, which was probably why I thought it was fun. But I think, and not just in hockey, I think in a lot of professional sports broadcasting, they assume that you know what's happening going in. They assume that if you're watching the broadcast, you know what's happening on the field, on the ice, on the court. And that's not always the case. And I feel like a lot of times that is a barrier to someone who might not have grown up with the sport, because you watch it and you're like, what is happening?
I would agree with that. And I feel like, so I've been taking a sportscasting class, and within that isn't actually something they teach you about, like, educating your viewer. It's very much like getting the information out quickly, because you only have, 30 seconds to talk about this game before you have to move on to the next game when you're talking about sports highlights. So that's a very good point. And I feel like that is probably something that future sportscasters should be educated on, and not to make an entire sportscast out of it, but to at least have those moments to help bring in those new viewers.
It added an element to color commentary.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch any sport, there's usually a color commentary person and the play-by-play person. The color commentary person, again, is always coming from that the team you're watching, the sport you're watching. And I think there were opportunities that they really used to their advantage in this, of explaining and trying to make it accessible and trying to really create fans, which I thought was cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. So we'll see what happens with the Frozen Frenzy.
I hope it comes back. I really do. And now that Disney, I think, is going to have is going to buy a major stake in Hulu, or buy all of Comcast, more to come on that. I think it might be cool to see if it crosses between multiple different streaming platforms too. Like, what are they going to do? Anyway, I thought it was cool.
Yeah. Well, moving on, we also had our first outdoor game of the season.
The Battle for Alberta.
Yes, the Heritage Classic. And this was the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames facing off against each other. And Edmonton, they definitely took it to the Flames.
They really did. I mean, you've got... It's two teams that, one has been a solid powerhouse for a while, Edmonton. Mm-hmm. The Flames have been up and down. I think similar to the Red Wings and the Devils, they've been in a rebuilding year for like 5 years or so, or more. And this game made it feel like they were still there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But, the Oilers didn't have the greatest start at the season. So the fact that they won this game, too, was also like a nice little confidence boost for them, because I think everyone expected them to come out of the gate a little bit heavier than they did.
That is true. And I think what is great about all of these games, the outdoor games, is it kind of brings things back to like the spirit of hockey in general. And I think for a lot of players, there's a lot of nostalgia factor to it. And, we all watch these games in a climate-controlled arena, even if it is chilly. There is something fun about being outside watching a game. And I think I like when they do the outside games and they have these rivalries, or even just like two Canadian teams playing each other, or like the Stadium Series is going to be that it's essentially the, like, where I grew up, it was the tri-state area. So it's like the tri-state area on Showcase. Mm-hmm. I think it's cool. So I was impressed by Edmonton's run. I think hopefully that sets them up for a good season. I don't know. Yeah. I think when you win one of those games, there's a bit more of a fire under your butt. It gives you a little bit of too. Pep in your step.
Yes. Now let's move on to a team who's not winning any games.
Oh God. No. They are not. Muffy, what is happening with the San Jose Sharks?
I have no idea what is happening with the San Jose Sharks. We are recording here on Sunday, November 5th, and at time of recording, the poor San Jose Sharks have not won a game.
No, they've tied one. I hope by the time that this pod comes out, they will have won one. But to put that into perspective of what that means, so there are three Hughes brothers. Jack Hughes, who is arguably the best player in the NHL right now, although he did just get injured, and that makes me very nervous. Luke Hughes, the younger brother, who is a defenseman, who is also on the New Jersey Devils with Jack, and then Quinn, the oldest brother, who is on the Vancouver Canucks. Combined, these three brothers have more points than the entire San Jose Sharks team.
It's really sad.
It's so sad. What is happening?
I don't know.
What I'm also shocked at is I feel like when stuff like this happens, you're usually seeing heads roll like quick.
Right.
Like, they're not. So I don't know what's going on there. It's crazy. We'll have to look it up. I don't know if this is like a record or anything, but it's got to be demoralizing.
Oh, it's absolutely demoralizing. Absolutely demoralizing.
I started watching because I fell asleep because West Coast games are late for me sometimes. I started watching that game against Vancouver, and it was at San Jose, and the stadium was empty. So it's like on top of it, you're losing, and your fans aren't showing up, and I just feel like it's just compounding itself.
Yeah, and I mean the Sharks did not have a great year last year either.
No.
They ended the year 22, 44, and 16. So you didn't even win half your games.
No, but this is bad.
It's real bad.
So we'll see.
Real bad.
We'll see. Because it wasn't too long ago where people were thinking, like, could they be a cup contender? You know, in the Joe Thornton, Brent Burns day. Like, just...
Oh, Joe Thornton just announced his retirement, too.
He did, which is... I think he's, like, the last player from when I was a kid to retire. Which shows you how old Joe Thornton is. But he was a great player when he was playing. So.
Yeah. Yes, he was.
So, yeah, we'll keep you posted on the San Jose Sharks. I feel like I want to become an honorary Sharks fan just to put some good vibes out there for them.
Right.
Ooh,
they need some posy vibes.
They really do. Well, speaking of posy vibes, Muffy, what's going on with Pride Tape?
Well, at the beginning of the season, the NHL had banned any on-ice gear surrounding theme nights and causes. And while it was a blanket statement, we know it was geared at Pride Tape and the Pride Nights. But they have since reversed that.
They have. And to give context, this was around Pride Nights last year. There was a handful of players that for religious reasons, I'm using air quotes here because some of them might have been legitimate religious reasons, but I feel like all of these players have been playing for a long time before they started saying anything, refused to participate. So then the NHL made a blanket statement on any of them.
Yes.
And then that extended to the tape, which was totally something they could have done players could have done on their own anyway. And Muffy, what happened? Why did they make this reversal?
Well, there had been outcry from many teams and many leagues. A lot of the minor leagues and other professional leagues were not pleased with what the NHL was doing. But Travis Dermott of the Arizona Coyotes played with Pride Tape on his stick despite the ban. And guess what? The next day, the NHL reversed their stance.
Yep.
What I love about this is it is a almost no-name player.
Yep.
Making, a smaller salary. This was not your Sidney Crosbys, your Connor McDavids, your Austin Matthews. This was somebody that hardly anyone knows who has a whole lot more to lose because he's not making the salaries, doesn't have the name, that put his foot down and said, I don't care what you say. I'm supporting the cause I want to support.
Yeah, and I think that speaks volumes. I mean, anyone can do... The whole point of all of this is everyone should be able to do and support things that they are enthusiastic about, things that push the game, movements forward, if that's what feels right to them. But when you're not making millions of dollars, to stand up to something like that if they did not reverse this stance, it could have meant that he was out games. It could have meant that he lost a substantial amount of money. I mean, when players unions go on strike, they're rarely going on strike for the Connor McDavids, for the Austin Matthews. They're going on strike for these guys because they don't make as much money. They often aren't in the league as long. So to stand up and say this is wrong and do it, and especially do it on a team that we've talked about a lot, has had a lot of issues of their own of just getting enthusiasm for the team around Arizona. Yeah. I think this is really impressive. And he deserves a lot more praise than I think he got. I think the queer community really rallied around him, which I thought was great. I really commend him. So hats off to you, Travis.
Yes,
Dermott.
Absolutely.
I now know who you are, and I am a fan.
We're fans. We're fans.
If you ever want to come talk to us, let us know.
Yeah, for sure.
So, this is like a big switching jump because this is not a happy story.
It's not.
You've probably heard about this already, but we wanted to dive a little deeper into this. Adam Johnson, who was playing in the Elite Ice Hockey League in the UK, there was a horrific accident where he took a blade to the neck and died. He played 13 games in the NHL with the Penguins. This is a guy who's just playing a sport, who he loves, trying to make a living, back to those guys who are not multimillionaires, playing in Europe. And it was just a freak, horrible thing that happened. But in the aftermath of that, there have been a lot of social media posts. There's been a lot of media chatter about whether or not leagues are going to make neck guards, which could have prevented this, mandatory.
Right.
So, Muffy, you want to tell people where we're at with that?
Yeah. So there are a few leagues who have decided that they are going to mandate neck guards. The WHL is probably the closest to home for us with that. And then the English Ice Hockey Association is planning to mandate it. However, they do not govern the Elite Ice Hockey League that this happened in. And the EIHL is not planning on making neck guards mandatory, which is interesting when they're the league that it happened to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we've seen these types of injuries before, not often, but there's a very historic case in the NHL with a goaltender who it happened to, who survived and played games again like a couple weeks later, which was miraculous and amazing. But I don't know where we go from here. And I don't think a lot of leagues know where we go from here.
No, and I think if they do become mandatory, I think it's going to be a long time. I think it's going to be over generations. I think it's going to be one of those things, we talked about helmets last episode. There's probably going to be things where it starts off in lower leagues, definitely, around kids. There is a big difference too. If you're a kid growing up wearing a neck guard, you're more likely to just continue to wear it because it's part of what you do.
Yeah, and there are a lot of kids leagues who do. I saw a Tampa Bay Times article that came out just this past week that the area high schools were going to start mandating it. I know Hockey Canada does for their youth organizations. The USA Hockey and the NCAA do not, but there are some college players who choose to wear them. So I can definitely see it being a generational thing too.
And there are already some NHL guys who are starting to wear one. TJ Oshie is probably the most well-known, who has started wearing one and has said he is making this decision because of his kids. And if there's anything that he can do to make it so he's there to watch his kids grow up, he's going to try to do it.
Yeah.
So we'll keep watching it. And we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible.
It's absolutely
There's no way
horrible.
around that.
No.
That's a horrible way to die. That's a horrible thing to have happen to an arena full of people watching. Like
right.
that
and they did
just,
evacuate the arena when it happened.
Yeah. So I think everyone did the right thing in the moment. We'll just see where it nets out. Yeah. So do you know why NHL players don't wear neck protection?
Well, when I was looking into this topic a little bit, I did find an article in the Seattle Times that basically said a lot of NHL players abandon the neck guards for comfort reasons once they turn pro. And I'll read this quote from here that says, "It might sound trivial, but at the highest pro levels, when athletes compete for jobs that pay millions of dollars, they don't want anything detracting from their production. And players for years have complained that neck protection equipment is bulky, distracting, and too hot."
Which I am sure, though, there are a lot of guys who made the same argument around helmets.
Probably.
So we'll see. We will see what happens.
Well, why don't we switch over to women's hockey?
Yes, and end this section on a little bit of a lighter note. So the teams have names.
They do not technically yet. So here's what happened.
Okay, what happened?
So we recently talked about the Professional Women's Hockey League and how this will kick off in January. Yes. And a reporter out of Detroit did some sleuthing and found the PWHL had filed trademarks for 6 names.
Okay. I see.
So the names have not actually been announced. We don't know if these are the names for sure, but this is what is being speculated, again, as of time of recording on November 5th.
We're just spilling some tea here is what we're doing.
We are just spilling some tea. So here are the names on the table. The Toronto Torch.
I don't get that.
See, this is the only one I like.
No,
we'll get into the others.
We'll get into it, but I okay, yeah, no, yeah.
The Montreal Echo.
Also, I don't get any of them. It's my problem.
Ottawa Alert.
It's like
Minnesota Superior.
Like Lake?
Possibly. Boston Wicked.
I get that one. It's just dumb.
And the New York Sound.
I don't get that one either.
That one sounds like a soccer team to me. Like,
it does,
and maybe
but
because there's the Seattle Sounders, but
okay. Well, here's my other question now. Like for New York, where's the New York team based?
Don't know.
Like the city or the state?
Don't
okay.
know.
Because I, in my head, assumed the city, but none of them are great. I hope they don't stick.
I know. They're not good. They're not good. There's so much excitement over a women's professional hockey league, and then you throw shitty names like that out there.
Yeah. And I know I can't think of anything that would be better, but like thinking about like the WNBA, like the New York Liberty, great name. Makes sense.
The only reason I like the Toronto Torch is because I can actually picture branding and everything around that. The rest of these, like what's your logo gonna look like?
The Boston one, you could do something like witchy, and that might be fun.
It could be fun.
Like,
fun. But no, these were not good. These were not good.
Yeah, y'all send us notes. Let us know what you think. But I find it fascinating that these are what the trademarks were.
Yeah, that was what was submitted
for. We'll see. We'll keep you posted. And yeah,
I mean, they're going to have to announce the name soon, because if you're starting off the season in January, we're only a couple months away from that.
That's true. And it takes a minute to brand stuff.
Yeah. We'll see. Maybe that will get to be an anything goes period. We can rank the PWHL names or branding or whatever once they're finally announced.
We definitely will have to do that. We should also like run the names through like Mid-Journey and see what they come up with.
Yeah,
as logos.
That would be fun.
Anyway, tell us what you think. Hit us up on the gram or Twitter, because we refuse to call it X. Tell us what you think about these names. And with that, I think that wraps up our news section.
We'll be right back with more in period 2. All right, we are back for period number 2. And today we're going to talk about something we probably should have brought up in season 1, and we didn't. And that is the different positions that the players have on a hockey team.
That is true. We probably should have told you this first. We were assuming that even though this podcast is an educational hockey podcast, you came in with some knowledge. But we shouldn't have assumed, so we're going to fix that today.
We are. So there are 6 players for each team on the ice at a time.
Who are they, Muffy?
3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goaltender.
The goaltender's pretty self-explanatory.
The goaltender is pretty self-explanatory. It's the guy who has a lot more padding than everybody else standing in front of the net.
He tends the goal.
Yes.
They're generally the weirdest guys on the ice.
They are. They are. They have some weird superstitions and rituals and whatnot that they do to prepare for a game.
Yeah. When one of the anything goes, we're going to have to like break down weird superstitions.
Ooh, that would be a fun one.
Yeah. I've already got a few in my head. More to come.
All right. So then let's talk about defensemen. There are 2 of them.
What do they do, Muffy?
Well, I mean, they're on defense. They try to keep the opposing team from getting the puck in the net, getting into the zone.
And where do they usually play? And also, what is the zone?
So many things. So they typically, I don't know how to answer your first question of where they typically are, because in the face-off circle, they're typically in the back. But that's not always what happens on the ice when you're setting up a play.
Okay, let's talk about it in terms of, like, pee-wee hockey when you're first starting off. We're not talking about, like, Victor Hedman.
Well, Victor Hedman is a special defenseman because sometimes he likes to pretend he's a forward.
Right. Let's talk about, like, your average Joe Blow, Bogosian type defenseman. Let's talk about your stay-at-home defenseman.
All right. Well, they typically stay a little bit further back from the play so that they're closer to defending their own area of the ice, their own zone. And if our team is on offense and has the puck and is, shooting it at the net, the defenseman, again, will stay a little bit further back towards that blue line so that if the puck comes out of there, they can chase after it and try and get it back or keep the other team from going down the ice.
Yeah. A lot of times they're also, like, the bigger dudes. This is just generalizations. I mean, there are a lot of defensemen who are not gigantic and are super speedy, but then there are some that, like, generally the guys that you see that are bigger dudes, they're, like, broad, like, they look like a brick wall. Those are usually your defensemen. Usually. Every so often you get a forward like that, too.
So then let's talk about the forwards, because there are 3 of them on the ice at a time. 2 of them are considered wingers. You got a left wing and a right wing. One's on the left, one's on the right.
Yes.
And then you have a center. They take the face-offs.
Usually.
Sometimes they get kicked out of the circle and you have to have somebody else come in. We'll talk about that in another episode, because now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. But they are the offensive players who are zipping down the ice, trying to get the puck in the net. Yeah. What else am I missing about wingers or forwards?
Well, sometimes with the wingers, you'll notice, like, if they're a right-handed or a left-handed shot, sometimes that will determine what they will typically play.
It's true.
Because you're going to want a guy, not always, but again, if we're hockey 101ing it, you're going to want a guy who's like, they're shooting the puck from the side that they're playing. It doesn't always make a difference, but it kind of helps.
Sometimes it does.
It usually will come into play like when you see people getting those like there's like a little bit of room in like the corners of the net, and like it just helps. But the forwards are usually the fast guys. I would also say usually the wingers are the guys that are like the super fast guys.
That is true too.
Because they're zipping up and down and back.
Yes.
They make a lot of the plays. Having a good centerman is just key if you are wanting to win faceoffs, because usually if you win a faceoff, you're determining the play for the next time in between stoppages of plays. So, you want a guy who can get that puck as soon as it hits the floor and knows how to pass it. Anything else about the positions?
You typically have 4 lines of forwards. So you got 3 people on each line, and they rotate through those lines. And then you have defensive pairs. You got 3 sets of defensive pairs. And then 2 goaltenders, because, if somebody gets hurt, you need that backup goalie.
Yep. Or if, the other team scores too many goals on that goalie.
That too.
Like, I was just at a game where within the first, I think like 10 minutes of the game, they changed the goalie.
That does happen sometimes.
You get 3 quick goals on a goalie. Sometimes you just need to switch it up. Switch it up.
So it's an off night. Sometimes it's an off night for your goaltender. You got to switch them out.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll see teams play with a 7th defenseman, which means usually your 4th line is down a forward, and they'll rotate out some of the top players, usually from the 1st and 2nd line, to try to beef up some offense. And again, if it's a team where there might be a little more bruiser of a style, or they've got guys that are really great at shooting, like the Lightning do this a lot when they're playing like Toronto, or when you've got your like Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid's, the guys that like to shoot the puck a lot.
And again, this goes back to the Lightning and Victor Hedman sometimes thinking he's a forward, because you will see him get right up all in there chasing after the puck into the offensive zone.
Yeah, and then one of the forwards will have to drop back, which doesn't always work out to our advantage, but when he scores a goal, it's really quite nice. I think if you watch hockey now and you go back and look at, like, I would even say in the 90s, the positions were much more rigid at a certain point. I feel like today there's a lot more cycling, and by cycling I mean if you watch them play, like they're going in like they're literally
on and off the bench,
and then cycling in like circles depending on what style they're playing.
I see what you're saying. I thought you meant cycling through the lines.
Well, they cycle through the line. Yeah, they'll cycle through the lines pretty fast, but then it's always fun to watch like the time and like who's been on the ice the longest. Like defensemen typically will be on the ice a lot longer than other people.
Because there's less of them.
But they don't count the goalies in that because they're sort of there the whole time.
The whole time. 60 minutes of play.
60 minutes of play. I feel like that's the basics of the positions, right?
I think so. All right.
Got any questions? Let us know.
Yeah, we'll call the rep on period 2.
And we'll be back in just a minute for period 3. Welcome back to period 3, the anything goes period, where we talk about anything related to the sport of hockey. Sometimes it is fun trivia. Sometimes it is, what snacks are you eating at the game? And today, because we are in Native American Heritage Month, I thought that it might be cool to dive into possibly one of the first Indigenous Americans to play in the NHL. Have you heard of him, Muffy?
Would this be Clarence Taffy Abel?
It would be. So why we say he may be the first is because he actually had to hide his Chippewa identity from not just the athletic world, but from the world of America in the early 1920s, because he and his family were afraid that if they talked about it openly, he and his siblings would have been taken away and put into boarding schools, which at the time were known to not be great places. They were known for stopping kids from speaking their native language and practicing their cultures and traditions. So because Taffy could pass as white, that is what his family chose to do, which from a 2023 perspective is really sad, but we should still talk about him and we should still celebrate him, because not only was he probably the first Indigenous player, American player to play in the NHL, he was the first Native American player to play in the Winter Olympics representing the United States. And that we definitely know for sure. And that was in the 1924 Winter Olympics.
That was almost 100 years ago.
That was almost 100 years ago. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Crazy.
But very cool. And I'm happy you're bringing this topic up today for our Anything Goes.
Right? And Muffy, much like you, he's a Michigander.
What up?
So he is from northern Michigan. And according to Aaron Payment, a current chairman of Abel's tribe, he said that around that time, Indigenous people were welcome in certain circles, but not others. And hockey was one of the places where people could cross that imaginary line that was set and be accepted.
I find this very interesting given the current state of acceptance in hockey and all of the issues that have come up with the theme nights and, you know, having to create the Diversity Alliance and, you know, all of those things. I find this fascinating that in the early 1900s, it was much more accepting than it seems to be right now.
And to a degree, I mean, it's one of those things where, to be honest, people probably knew he was Native. They just didn't talk about it because he looked a certain way. And it is fascinating. It is fascinating that how sometimes things change and they stay the same. And because at some point we'll talk about Willie O'Ree. Willie O'Ree had a much harder time than Taffy because of the way he looked, because he physically looked different because he was Black. It's fascinating. And, you know, I think some of this is also, you know, he's coming up through amateurs. It's different. The NHL is not what we think of it as today.
Right.
And, you know, when he was playing, he didn't self-identify out of fear that, you know, some of those opportunities that he was getting would be taken away, even though he was starting to rise through the ranks of the sports. He started playing in high school because he passed for white, so he went to a white high school, and they played on a makeshift rink, which I feel like, I'm not from Michigan, but I feel like that's probably a thing that happens a lot up there.
It's very on brand. We had a makeshift ice rink in my backyard one year.
I mean, in New Jersey, it never really ever got that cold, so I think there was like one outdoor rink where I was, which was very fun to go to, but it was like, we were always like, oh my God, it's going to melt on like the Tuesday after it freezes. So when Taffy's father died, he became the sole breadwinner for his family. So he started working as a janitor and playing in amateur hockey to support his mom and his sisters. By all accounts, he could have played in the league today based on his size. He was 6'1".
Wow.
225 pounds. He was a big guy. He was a skilled guy. He was known for having one of the heaviest checks of the time, and they nicknamed him the Michigan Mountain. Honestly, when it sounds like you read about his personality and like his size, he kind of reminded me of like an early Pat Maroon.
I like it.
You know, like skilled but big and could beat you up when necessary. And then in 1924, he was recruited to be on the U.S. Olympic team. He didn't have enough money to travel to France, so he relied on friends to help him, and he was able to get there.
That's awesome.
Isn't that awesome?
Very good friends. Very good friends.
Very good friends, because even back then, you know that the Olympics and representing your country is an amazing opportunity, and especially if you're doing it as somebody whose people were first here, that's got to be a whole, I can't even imagine what that must be like, but
Yeah.
you're playing the sport, and not only was he on the team, this goes to show you his character. He was elected the captain of that 1924 hockey team, and he was selected by the entire U.S. delegation to hold the flag.
That's a huge deal. I mean,
Isn't
even to this day, whoever is selected to, you know, carry the flag in for the opening ceremonies is a huge, huge deal.
It's huge. You're going to be the person that's in all of the press images. You're going to be the person that if anyone talks to you, they're going to talk to you. Which, again, having to do this kind of under the cloak of not really fully being able to be open about who you are is insane, but he did it. And, you know, we'll get into it in a bit, but it also sounds like some of the fear came from, like, his family and his mother. Right. I'm jumping ahead, but after his NHL career, he didn't mention that he was Native American until after his mom passed away, because she still had that fear, even though we were now getting into the like 50s and 60s. But yeah, he captained that NHL team. He held the flag.
The Olympic team.
The Olympic team. Thank you.
No worries.
Words are hard.
It happens. It happens to the best of us.
It happens. It does. And then he played 8 seasons in the NHL for the New York Rangers and the Chicago Blackhawks, which also that's, you know.
You know, we can get into this at a different point with the Blackhawks, but when I started doing a little more digging into the name of the team, it is named after like a specific chief who was Blackhawk.
Yes, but still, like, that has to be like a total mind fuck.
Yes, but having that piece to me made it different than when it's like named after a full tribe or, you know, like the Washington Redskins.
Yeah, no, that was just straight up racist. But he helped both teams win Stanley Cups. So not only was he an Olympian, he was a Stanley Cup winner, which also means if you go to the Hockey Hall of Fame, you can find his name on one of the cups, or on multiple cups, actually. Well, rings of the cup. And he did all of this again, still under hiding, under the cloud of who he was, because he was afraid that he would get fired just by what he looked like.
It's also impressive that he won Stanley Cups with both the Rangers and the Blackhawks, because of the original 6 teams, they are the ones who have won it the least.
Yes. It also just goes to show you he was good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's a really good player who broke barriers that we just pigeonholed. Or not pigeonhole, we just memory hold because, and we'll get into it, but essentially the NHL still to this day does not recognize him as one of the first Indigenous players because they claim they didn't keep demographic records then.
Sure, that sounds suspect.
That sounds suspect, right? And that because he didn't identify as Native when he played, I was like, that's a BS, because back to after he retired and his mother passed away, he did tell people that he was Chippewa. He did tell people he was Native. He started an amateur hockey league up in northern Michigan and named it after, I don't remember exactly. We'll post in the show notes a Washington Post article that goes into more detail about this, but there was something that he named it after a tradition with his mother. So it was like super obvious. Mm-hmm. So it's weird to me that the NHL, who is pushing diversity, and I am all for all of those efforts, and I think everything that they've been doing with Black and African American players and pushing them into prominence is great. But this is PR gold here, people.
Right?
Like, talk about it. This.
Especially like when you know, based on the timing and when he was playing and when he shared his cultural background, like, you have to still just be able to timeline it out and figure it out.
Yes, it's so strange. It's so strange to me that they don't talk about it. You would think this guy would be celebrated. So that's a high-level view of the Taffy Abel story. Like I said, we'll put links in the show notes so you can learn more. But we should be talking about this guy. He seems like a cool guy.
Absolutely. Thank you for this little history lesson, Stephanie.
Anytime. And with that, I guess the show's over. I always get sad when the show's over.
It is pretty sad, but we'll be back again in just a couple weeks. And until then, you can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, still refusing to call it X. You can find us at 5-Hole Podcast. You can also send us an email at shutyour5holepodcast@gmail.com. And we look forward to sharing more hockey news with you next time.
Thanks. Bye.